Hey, thanks for coming. We're really impressed. My goodness, a Friday night in July, you're the plant geekiest of the plant geekiest. For a single genus talk about one specific plant. I'm super impressed by all of y'all, so I just gotta start with saying that. That's awesome. You're among friends with plant geeks too, because we are also the plant geekiest of the plant geekiest, as we hope to show you a little bit of here.
Yeah, so as he said, I'm Tim, this is my brother Matt. We do over 1,000 different varieties of Japanese maples, and we actually do over 150 different varieties of ginkgos. Yeah.
So that's individual cultivars. When we say varieties, we kind of narrow it down, but those are specific trees selected for a certain set of traits.
So the projector was all set up earlier, and it didn't cover any single setting that I had for it. So we're getting there.
Where's your physical location?
Oh, we're based, that's a great question. She asked, where's our physical location? We're based out of East Flat Rock, North Carolina. If anyone knows where Asheville, North Carolina is, we're about 20 minutes south of that. If you know where Hendersonville, North Carolina, that's going to town for us. And we graft and produce mostly everything we do at our nursery. And there we go there.
Like I said, we do over 1,000 varieties of maples, but a lot of different stuff. Ginkgos is our second most popular plant in our nursery, around 150. We have 50 different types of dawn redwoods and a little bit of everything. We're just huge plant geeks. We like the rare and unusual. We get into a genus, we say we want the contorted form, the columnar form, the variegated form, and the weeping form. You gotta have those, and so then it goes on from there. But of course, that love didn't stop with ginkgos. Ginkgos are by far one of our most popular items we do. In fact, there's some months where ginkgos outsell maples at our nursery, which shocks people when we tell them that. But
Oh, hey, we never plugged this into the computer.
I forget everything apparently over the summer, gang.
Which one is your more expensive? Which is your most expensive, a ginkgo or a maple?
it just depends. Most of our things are priced by age. Like our super rare stuff in 1 gallons are typically 35 to 50, depending on if it's like super, super rare. So we have maples and ginkgos that are both priced in that kind of price range. We go all the way up to 40-gallon size plants. We do have gigantic stuff at the nursery. Like our 15-year-old maples are 600, but they're 15 years. Part of my big get-rich-slow plan for 15 years of growing something. We do offer larger material as well. We don't have many ginkgos in the extremely big sizes like we do with the maples, but.
And we are brothers. People don't look at us and we look completely different other than both having beards right now. But we are brothers. And we're blessed to be able to do what we love for a living and do it together, with my brother, who's one of my best friends, which is pretty awesome.
So we do Mr. Maple and Mr. Ginkgo. Mr. Maple has about 86 different cultivars of ginkgos on it right now, so it's a little bit nuts. We mostly male cultivars, but we'll talk a little bit about some female ginkgos today too. Maybe it's a bad word for you, but we will talk a little bit about a few of those today.
So as we're going through here, we're gonna talk first a little bit about what people never really think much about ginkgo. You can actually make ginkgo tea from the leaves. And I always like telling people about this, and often I wait till the end of the presentation, and then people start thinking about all the plants that they could get to make this ginkgo tea out of. And instead, now I'm actually going to talk about it at the beginning, because then people can realize you can do that with a dwarf, you can do that with a lot of different varieties.
And people say, well, does it work with this one? Does it work with this one? It works with every one of them, actually.
So what you actually do with ginkgo tea is you take a ginkgo leaf, you take a ginkgo leaf off of the ginkgo, you dry it to a golden brown, then you cut the stamen, I think it's called, that's the stamen. It's
Petiole?
the petiole. You cut the petiole part off. It's hard. And once that's dried to a golden brown, then you have a leaf that looks almost like this right here. And then you just simply crush that up and put that into your tea. And that's full of ginkgo biloba, which is high in antioxidants. It's supposed to be really good for your memory. And that's what you buy at the store, right there in those little bottles for super expensive, which you can do right at home, really simple and really easy.
In the fall, when they turn yellow, and you can collect them at that point.
You sure can.
Beyond there.
No, you can definitely do it at that point, because basically you're letting it dry out anyways. It's the exact same, still has the exact same properties.
So you can collect them and
Yeah, the only time of the year you can't do it is with a super fresh new growth that shrivels up rather than dries out. So if you start seeing it shrivel up, it's too early. You need to wait to let that leaf mature a little bit.
Now, ginkgos are the oldest living fossil record that's still alive today. So ginkgos have People were like, how hard are these? I'm like, they're pretty tough. They turn a little while. Like, if you kill a ginkgo, it's kind of special because it takes a lot. The main thing is well-drained soil. They don't want to be in foggy or wet feet. But ginkgos, like, they're literally the oldest living fossil record that's still native today.
So if any of you are on Facebook, you probably saw these photos going around last fall. So I like showing people and reminding them why ginkgos. Well, I'll show you why ginkgos. The fall color is electric. There's nothing really that can compete with the fall color of a ginkgo. It's one of the most bright and intense plants. And every single ginkgo goes to that bright yellow fall color. Every single one. There's not really much variation in ginkgo's fall colors. If you Google search, go down there, every single one will look exactly the same except for one or two that's been photoshopped.
Yeah, don't call us about blue maple seeds from China, by the way. If you've seen that, it's like viral as heck this year. Blue photoshopped like bonsai ginkgos. I'll probably get 3 calls a week about blue. He's like, no. But when we get them in, we won't. But there's no blue ginkgos either. So.
Last year on April Fool's, a fellow nurseryman who's a friend of ours sent out to all his customers that he had a blue ginkgo, and he got 1 million phone calls. It was great.
Kind of reverse joked himself there.
Well, I think he told him that Lowe's had them.
Yeah, he started getting It's a good switcheroo there. We said everything we had.
But just amazing fall colors. Now, how we started out in ginkgos is we had a few ginkgos we were propagating around the nursery, but then I was actually in college, and my brother was able to go to Europe with the maple society meeting.
So yeah, we went on the North American Maple Society meeting. It was in Belgium, and I got to go to, it's actually Sir Harold Hillier Gardens in London, which is an amazing garden. Everything was in perfect fall color. And I'm like, why aren't we doing more of these? Why are these different cultivars? There's dwarf cultivars, there's columnar, there's so much diversity here. Why are these so hard to find? Like, why is it taking me all this time to find the differences? So it kind of put us on a bigger path of, we need to find these really cool ones and make them available at the ginkgos. This really complements what we do a lot. This is actually one at the National Arboretum there in Belgium. It's not a selection made, but just a seedling that was super columnar, and they were thinking about introducing it. The tree's about 60 feet in that picture. It's kind of more narrow overall habit.
And so this is actually a photo Matt took in the French Pyrenees. And he said, Tim, everywhere I went, there were ginkgos in fall color. He said, we have heavily underutilized this plant in the United States. We need to get onto it. And as you know, the gardening trends in Europe are typically a little bit ahead of those here in America. And that's exactly what's starting to happen, is you're starting to see more ginkgos become more available in the United States. That's just when Matt went to go check out Friar Park.
Yeah, crazy plant collector, obviously the geek. So I was not too far from Friar Park, which is George Harrison's estate. And George Harrison, he's the rock star of gardening that nobody ever talks about. But he said his greatest accomplishment wasn't being a beetle, but planting over 800 trees at Friar Park. So he's got all these awesome maples and ginkgos. Of course I didn't get in, but what peeked over the gate. Now I'm friends with the gardeners, so when we go back, maybe. But so this is like a mile outside of Friar Park. I went and ate this little wheel restaurant and started admiring all the ginkgos down the street there as well. So.
You know, Washington D.C. is learning.
Oh yeah.
It's downtown or something.
It's amazing. So this is at Sir Harold Hillier Gardens there in London as well.
That's actually a form of witch's broom, which is a dwarf compact ginkgo. There's actually a bunch of different forms of witch's broom. So if you have the cultivar witch's broom, there's witch's brooms all over, because most of the dwarf compact forms of ginkgos are found through witch's brooms.
Just again, some great fall colors here. These are around the gardens there. And it really piqued our interest. I believe this is actually in Seattle.
Yeah.
This is at the...
This is at the Washington Arboretum, the Japanese Gardens of the Washington Park Arboretum. And this is when I was able to really start seeing a lot more ginkgos ourselves. So we really started going crazy with them. And I always like to tell people sort of the background of how we fell in love with it, because people often, if they see our passion for it, then they start to catch on too.
Then we get into the more geeky stuff. We start out slow and then we show you the really weird ones. So the fall color suckers us in. I mean, that's what people think of when they think of ginkgos. There could be a ginkgo on your street, people love it every day, but then as soon as fall hits, somebody calls me and they're like, what the heck is this in my neighbor's yard? And I get a million text messages, and what is this tree?
And the reason why ginkgos are so amazing is they're salt tolerant, they're heat tolerant, they're cold tolerant, they're pollution tolerant. So we're talking about a plant that's extremely, extremely easy to grow, want some sunlight mostly. And the real trick with growing ginkgos, give them lime. Ginkgos love lime. Lime are what makes the ginkgos grow. Lime and fertilizer. Lime adjusts the soil pH so that the ginkgos can actually take up the nutrients and water more efficiently.
Ginkgos like it slightly more alkaline, so that lime actually adjusts the pH, and so they'll grow so much quicker. What you'll find, even on the dwarf varieties, are your caliper. We're in a wire, so we're giving out trade secrets since we're mic'd here. But so it thickens up the base a ton. You'll find that that caliper just thickens up a lot, and in turn, you'll get a lot of growth as a result. So a real good tip. We learned that from some friends in Japan, and it really made a big difference on the growth rate.
Like on a 3-gallon tree, you could put ginkgo, 3 tablespoons on it, spring, summer, and fall. And it really is a great thing to get that motor running, especially when it's getting established. You don't have to keep giving it lime each year, although you can. But once you get that motor running, it really makes the tree take off. If you don't lime the tree, it may take 10 or 15 years for that plant to get established.
And by
very
lime,
much growth.
we mean pelletized garden lime. I apologize if the person's in the room that called me and asked, but I did have a person this year call me and they're like, I squeezed the lime all over the leaves. Should I bury the rind next to it as well, or will it still grow? And I was like, wait, what? Like, no, I squeezed the lime all over the leaves, and I'm like, oh, you mean like you were squeezing like fruit on the leaves? Like, I thought I was getting punked. Like, I didn't think it was real. But apologize if you're in the room, but that was a real call. We should record some of these. But pelletized garden lime, it's like $4 a bag, super cheap. But that is really a big time trick for getting the growth rate up.
Being in retail, you deal with everybody. So we love answering people's questions. And
We won't make fun of you in our presentations. You squeeze the lime all over the leaves.
And so this is actually down in Savannah at the Atlantic State.
Gulf State's Botanic Garden.
Yeah. They have around at their campus, the whole campus is a garden. If you ever get a chance, go down there, check it out. Lots of amazing rare species.
Armstrong State.
Armstrong State, there we go. Armstrong State Botanical Garden, which is the whole university.
The whole campus is the
Yeah.
Botanical Garden. It's just tucked in every building.
Lots of rare Acer species, maple species, lots of rare plant species of all types.
So
And
we always list ginkgos as good zones 3 through 9. Literally a massive range there. I mean, we're talking Minnesota to zone 9, heavy zone 9. And I've actually seen examples of them growing in zone 10. I've yet to confirm it myself, so I don't tell people zone 10 until I actually see it. But I have tons of customers that say they're growing it with great success in a heavy zone 10 as well.
And once again, what you want to do with ginkgos is give them some sunlight. So this is actually a ginkgo that Matt and I tracked down. It's on the University of Virginia's campus. And
This is right by the Thomas Jefferson Garden, so I don't know, I never could get anybody to confirm whether this specific plant was planted by Thomas Jefferson, but certainly around the same time frame as the garden he planted nearby.
it's rumored by gardeners in the area that it was planted by Jefferson. So if that translates, there might be someone who can confirm it, but if you can, let us know. But as you can see me here, and then when we back up, there's me there. This is a huge, huge, huge ginkgo. We love checking out these old plants because they really tell you a lot about a plant. We often laugh at people that say, oh, this is the mature height is this, because we always tell people if it's a tree that's going to live for hundreds or thousands of years, as I showed earlier, that 1,400-year-old.
What's the biggest this can get? I'm like, that's a loaded question. I never say this is the max ever. What we try to do, instead of even saying mature, we try to say 15 years. 15 years out, this is where we would expect it to be growth rate wise. We saw a Japanese maple. We were on a TV show last October in Japan, and we saw a 650-year-old example of Jiro Shidari. Awesome plant. Japanese maple, 650 years old. If I were to say, what's the max size Jiro Shidari get? It'd be like 30 by 30. So to me, that's more of a 5 by 5 plant for us. Not really a dwarf if you go 600 years out.
In 15 years. So it's best to give a time frame rather than saying a maturity.
But that's why you will see some discrepancies in a lot of different websites. Like, people always say, well, why do I find so much different information on heights? And it's because people say at maturity. And what does that mean? Like, if it's a male ginkgo and it doesn't seed, what age did it mature at? So we try to give a good time frame of what we expect.
You want to talk about this one, Matt?
Sure, this is in Augusta, Georgia. This is one of the oldest ginkgos in America. There's actually one slightly older in Pennsylvania, I've been told. 1791, it's an awesome plant to go see. We were down there at a garden show, and I had to go over and check it out. Probably didn't play the video, but kind of walked around it and made my wife stand under it so I could give a perspective of the tree and everything. But just amazing, some of these giants that are, look at the age on these trees.
And this ginkgo was on record as being planted in 1791 to commemorate George Washington visiting Augusta, Georgia. So when you look at it and you say, wow, these are living fossils. They are trees that have been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years and will be around for thousands of years to come. They're really exceptional and really hardy trees.
So, do we have anybody that's exclusively natives? Because this is a native tree if you go back far enough as well. I always like to throw that one out there when people go, this isn't a native. I'm like, well, actually, what's your time frame for only natives?
So this is at the Dallas-Fort Worth Botanical Garden, and this is one of the reasons we started realizing one of the moments we started realizing how pliable and easy to shape ginkgos are. They're one of the most easy plants to shape. If someone's wanting to do a bonsai, run across a trellis, or just simply shape for something fun and unique.
So all the different cultivars have their own unique habits. So some are going to be naturally more columnar, but you can certainly exaggerate those characteristics. They're, like as Tim said, they're super malleable to those shapes. This one has been continuously pruned into this nice topiary, but you'll see ginkgos done as espaliers. I mean, the Swarthmore, tons of places, National Arboretum, tons of places across walls because they lend themselves so well to shaping. This is actually a Ginkgo biloba Saratoga as the cultivar. If you've seen Saratoga before, that ain't the typical shape, but you can play with the shapes a good bit.
Yeah, and simply up against the side of a wall. So, whenever it's up against the side of a wall, there's times when it's going to be getting scorching heat. This photo was probably taken in June or July.
No, actually, probably actually closer to fall.
Okay.
This is at the National Arboretum, right, the entranceway to the bonsai exhibit. So it's actually a good bit bigger than this now. It's probably about 5 years ago.
So you're thinking it's against the wall, it's going to be getting a lot of heat on those leaves. And this tree is doing well. And as you see, it holds those shapes really, really well, which is something that's really fun and pliable to work with. And this is actually at Swarthmore College that Matt was talking about. I believe this is their science building.
Gorgeous ways to play. I mean, really, we're just showing this because it's a fun species to play with. And any of the cultivars can be trained to go into different shapes. Like, especially something that's super columnar, if you continue to cut it back continuously, it's not going to be as columnar. But the shapes are going to lend themselves to that idea. So then you can play with it however you want as well.
And ginkgos are, they can be worked really well for bonsai too. One, because they shape real well, and two, because they're hardy that you can almost take the roots down to nothing and the plant will still thrive. So really hardy plant that's easy to grow and fun to use.
So last year when we were on the show, in fact, I think I told Beth, like when we were here for the 40 years of JCRA, I didn't tell everybody because it wasn't 100% official. Like we literally got the text message when we were about to present here for the 40 years, and I was like, like this might be official. They invited us to be on this TV show called Nipponi Ikitai, which is, everybody knows what that means, right? That means who wants to go to Japan? And so like we got this email, maybe I'm a little bit more pessimistic than my brother Tim, but I got this email and it said, hey, would you like to be on this TV show called Who Wants to Go to Japan? And I was like, yeah, and there's a Saudi prince that needs my credit card number. That doesn't sound legit to me. Like, I'm like, no, that's not gonna happen. Well, Tim sends them that day he's like, we gotta do this, Matt. So we go and we shoot a clip with an intro for this video we put together. He has like a musical interlude of us walking through the nursery and talking about different places we want to go in Japan that day. It gets back to him the day the email came, and he was right. It worked out. We got to go to Japan for the TV show.
Yeah, it was crazy because I think we found out officially we were doing that, and then was it also that exact same time we found officially, it was shortly before that we found out about our Country Gardens magazine.
Yeah, we'll actually be in Country Gardens this next month as well. So.
On talking about Japanese maples, so do check out Country Gardens
You
magazine.
know us, we're super small. It's pretty cool for us to get mentioned in anything. But this was a crazy opportunity. We're going to show some cool stuff we did while we were in Japan with ginkgos there too. 12 million people saw it in Japan. It's probably about as popular as like Undercover Boss or something here. It was kind of crazy. It was kind of surreal to be on this TV show, and then we filmed for 8 days and then they quit, and you're like, we're not cool anymore. Like, it was fun when there was a camera crew. Now we just walk around aimlessly. But
We would walk around and they would see the cameramen come and recognize their armbands, Tokyo TV. People would start singing the theme song to
Yeah, to the TV show. They'd have to edit all that down. Like, hold on, till people quit singing, quit talking. We gotta get people to quit singing the theme song.
So it was a really, really fun time. And if you think going to Japan is fun and that the people love showing you around and they're super nice over in Japan, it's true. We went 2 years ago, amazing. But when you go on a TV show, they roll
We
out
were
the red
spoiled
carpet.
rotten, man. It was awesome. But this was the intro to the show, so we throw that up. But we do a couple things on our downtime to get to go. This, I should have brought a bigger slide. That's the 650-year-old tree, the JCRA. And they came and shot at our nursery for 4 days, and then we shot in Japan for 8, and then probably half the show was at our nursery, so they must have liked it.
It didn't seem real at all until we got off the plane and they were sitting there with the camera and the host of the show holding a sign saying, "Welcome to Japan."
That's
And they've got a camera on us and we're walking
We're away.
off the plane. So
Really cool experience. I mean, a chance of a lifetime for us, and we got to see some really cool stuff.
But one of the things we wanted to see was Iki Namachi Avenue, and that is Ginkgo Avenue. It's known all around the world really as this amazing display of colors, ginkgos lining that are perfectly shaped. They're gorgeous, and I was like, man, I really want to see this. But our TV show was all on maples, and so it wasn't something that they said that we were going to be able to get to do. But we had a down day on a Sunday when they weren't shooting. We were in Tokyo, and so Matt and I, we get a little bit of a wild hair, and
Let's do the bus system, or let's do the train system.
do the train system in Japan without the interpreter, and let's figure this out because we'd already driven 3,000 miles in Japan the time before. We said, well, if we can figure out the bus system or the bus system and the train system, then we can do bus, train, car. We've got Japan covered. We can do it all. And
Train system's no joke. We really wanted to see us to brave the train system for this. It's intense. But we got to go to Ikinamaki Avenue, and it's the event of the year here. Like, it's awesome. These have all been trained into shapes.
And
Literally,
once
they
again-
shut the road down. Like, traffic stops. I thought about playing some of the audio clips of just video, but they're kind of loud because everybody's like partying. Like, it's crazy. The whole road shuts down for like 10-minute increments. And as soon as like they start blowing whistles, everybody out of the road, then all the traffic goes again. And then 10 minutes later, it goes to a complete stop. Everybody runs back out, and everybody's dressed for a T. Like they're there for pictures. Everybody's got their dogs, their kids, everything's ready. Like probably 50 dogs with just like wiener dog and pictures of trees. Like it's nuts.
it was hilarious. There were young people out shooting videos for YouTube, doing like music videos, dressing up like the party rock people, dancing around. I mean,
It's intense. And then everything, blow the whistle, everybody runs out of the road, and the traffic goes again for 10 minutes. So of course we had to get involved. We ran out on the road and checked all this out. But there's literally probably 300 trees on each side of the street, perfect fall color, and they've all been meticulously shaped. So this isn't a cultivar that grows into this perfect spire, but these have been shaped. So you can see the attention to detail with pruning for these.
What month?
This was in October, late October.
no. This time it was November.
This was already November, so it was
It was
first
right
November.
around Thanksgiving because we actually missed Thanksgiving at home, and
Yeah.
it was right around when they had the earthquakes.
But we were in Iwaki City shooting when they had the earthquake last year. We went and shot a section in Kyoto and then down in Osaka. So we went much further south. Iwaki City's in the far north. It's in the Fukushima prefecture where everything went crazy a couple years ago and they had the big tsunami. And we're shooting there and my friend's like, hey, we're fine, everything's good. Great. So then we got in the truck and buses and they took us south, and then that's when they had another earthquake. It was like major in that area.
We were actually in Tokyo, this city
Yeah.
here, when some aftershocks happened. And Matt and I were on the ninth floor in separate rooms and just start tumbling. And
I thought he was jumping up and down on my bed. I'm like, what are you doing, man? And then nobody's in the room.
And we're both texting each other at the same moment, like, did you feel that? And it's like
That didn't make
4
the
o'clock in
news.
the
The
morning.
3.9 didn't even make the news. That was like, whatever. It snowed 4 days after this, by the way.
It was one of the first times they had
Yeah.
snow before December.
Yeah.
So
So just craziness. These are, you'll see Chi-Chi as a cultivar. And this has this Chi-Chi-like. That's actually something you'll see repeating in some different species or some different selections. But it kind of has that stalactite kind of look to it.
And there's different selections based on how much of that stalactite almost growth that it gets. And Chi-Chi's obviously one that y'all have seen over here at the Arboretum that gets that pretty prolifically.
Gorgeous street though, and it's just great. It's madness, and it's fun, the most fun way to check out plants. A little bit more of a street view so you can see all the way down. This is when they're clearing everybody out of the road to let the cars come back in. But just amazing fall colors. But that's the excitement of ginkgos, that people get excited for those different fall colors. And like Tim was saying, the fall colors are pretty true to form on all of the cultivars we're going to talk about too. You will see a little bit of difference in some of the variegated forms. Like you'll see some white still in the variegation, but for the most part, all the ginkgos are going to have a very similar bright gold that we think of in the fall. And the palette on the floor is, I think, just as remarkable. I always go around and take pictures of the ginkgo leaves once they hit, because it's just a carpet of gold, and I love that.
We actually have a customer of ours in Charlottesville, Virginia, that throws a dinner, like a big party for all of her neighbors. Every time she sees a ginkgo leaf start to fall, she says, oh, pretty soon this whole thing's going to be covered. Let's have a big party. And so she'll plan a party based on when the ginkgo leaves are on the ground, because it's just a fun time to go out and enjoy just, a yellow carpet.
Part of the episode that didn't make it, we went into the wild, and we, like Nakata-san was one of the nurseries we learned that, and we recreated a landscape of Japanese maples and native Japanese plants again. And so we recreated this look of this river, and the ginkgo leaves with the maple leaves were used to make the river on the temporary view of like this little small native garden we made. But it was really cool to see the yellow as the river part.
And in Japan, they often really enjoy, they think a part of the fall color, with a lot of our natives, as soon as the leaves start falling, we go out and start raking them up. But with ginkgos and some Japanese maples, when they go to fall color and they drop, it's some of the most beautiful times to go out there. And so they actually have a word that basically means fall color by the foot, which is supposed to mean like one of the most beautiful times of the year.
So it's like more appreciated as a carpet almost.
And that's just maples and ginkgos. This is actually at a Japanese garden right outside of Kyoto that we went to.
So we'll get into the cultivars. We talked about why we love ginkgos, but now we'll get into some more specific shapes. You may recognize this tree. It's actually about right over there, about say 50 feet from the door. But this is a Ginkgo biloba gnome, and one of our most popular trees. Well, it's right by the other building.
Yeah. But one of the neat things about this ginkgo is, remember how we talked about ginkgos, mostly all of them came as witch's brooms, as dwarf mutations that are found on other trees.
For the compact form.
Yeah, this is a dwarf compact form that was found as a chance seedling. So it was very unique and different in that respect, that it's actually a dwarf selection that was found as a chance seedling in Tennessee, rather than a witch's broom like the rest of the dwarf selection.
Always popular, especially I think the name, a name for a plant has so much to do with it too, but everybody wants a gnome in the garden. So the name has a lot to do, I think, with popularity, but it's a great shape. Typically this one's more of a 5x5. And we've actually zoomed this in. The one you'll see out here is on a little bit of a standard. I do feel that putting ginkgos on a huge standard, depending on the size of standard, can affect the overall shape of it long term as well. Most of our ginkgos are low grafted, kind of a side veneer graft that keeps them a little bit smaller. Sometimes putting them up on a giant standard, you'll see the bigger the rootstock it's grafted to, essentially it's a bigger motor. And so if you're grafting it to a 3-inch caliper rootstock already that's this high up on a standard, I think that's going to have a lot of influence over the tree long term. So by low grafting them, you'll actually see a much smaller long term shape.
With grafted plants, you'll see sizes of plants are basically often determined on by the size of the scion that was grafted onto it and the roots finding that balance point where they grow and become a healthy plant. And if you have a much bigger root system pushing behind of a ginkgo or a maple, if you went and grafted to a really big maple, you can actually get a much bigger tree than people think that they actually get, because that balance is changed with the rootstock and the top of the.
That root system still wants to be a giant tree, so it's pushing harder than you would if you grafted it on a much smaller plant.
Now,
so when low grafted, these are typically more of like 5x5, so more of a compact, dense ball.
Now, one thing we talked about earlier is there are male ginkgos and female ginkgos. Male ginkgos are mostly desirable for the landscape because they don't fruit. The fruit on female ginkgos, if it sits, it can really start stinking. it has butyric acid in it that starts rotting shortly thereafter. We will here a little bit talk about the benefits of some of the female selections, and so we will get to those too.
But most of the ones we're going to talk about today are male selections.
And we've saved the female ginkgos for the last 3. So once we start getting towards the end, they will specifically say fruiting on them, and we'll talk about that. So don't worry, if you're looking for a male ginkgo, most of the ones in our presentation that we're talking about are all male selections, except for the ones that will specifically say are female.
And this has a great, more of a small, compact, dense habit, but still has that great kind of golden fall color, but in a much smaller palette.
And again, this is the ginkgo leaves. You can actually make the tea from this one as well. So you could grow it in a deck pot if you don't have space to garden, and still be able to get those benefits of the ginkgo biloba.
Now with ginkgos too, this is true of all the cultivars. We recommend about at least 4 hours of sun a day. If you give them less than that, what you tend to get is more of like a bright, like a dark emerald color actually. So the color will be a little bit darker, and they will be a little bit slower growing in heavy, dense shade.
And
they'll still be fine plants, and actually they'll still live for a long time in the shade, but they won't have quite the same vigor unless they're getting about 4 hours of sun.
And they will be a little more sparse in the shade versus sunlight. Sunlight, they definitely will be a lot more dense. So this is a really fun one. This is one called Beijing Gold. We had one here earlier today, and
You got grabbed up quick.
got grabbed up quickly. Beijing Gold actually leaves out as a yellow. So it's one of the few ginkgos that has an amazing spring color with a little bit of sunlight. And it goes to this amazing yellow, and then the chlorophyll starts coming in from the base of the leaf and pushing out towards the edge. So
This is
late
actually,
spring-
on the left there is kind of an early, like late spring actually,
mid to late
picture on
spring.
that one. And then this is more of like now type variegation that you see, that white kind of pop through. Tons of cool variegated ginkgos. We're going to talk about some of our favorite variegated ones. The variegated ones are super popular. I think at the Conifer Society, the auction one, a variegated ginkgo went for like $450 or something crazy. So variegated ginkgos are a huge craze right now. We picked some of our favorites that are the most stable as well. So this one's one that never reverts and always gives you something.
And this is a Beijing Gold is a ginkgo that is getting about 6 to 8 foot, more upright, but also more, it will make more bush on its form, but then also go to that brilliant yellow again in the fall. So you have some spring interest. During the summer, the new growth will have little shoots of variegation as you see up here.
But it's actually more variegated during this time of the season. So you get more of the white striping, almost like that tiger striping type design to it. Late summer to now, so early summer to now.
So on ginkgo leaves, there are lots of different leaf shapes, and we'll talk about some of those. This is one called tubiformis. Tubiformis is typically an upright ginkgo. It can get around 14 to 15 feet in that 15 to 20 year window. So it's not a huge growing ginkgo when it comes to vigor. But the leaves will actually curl up like little wine glasses.
It's almost like a champagne glass,
Yeah.
like a little cup top.
Or
They look like little tubes on everywhere. Really a cool habit. You still get that great fall color, but in a unique, different leaf. We'll talk a lot about some different leaf textures with the ginkgos we're going into, because we like to show some of the differences. People are like, oh, ginkgos, those are all the same. There's so much different leaf shape, color, there's so much different interesting nuance, but this one's pretty out there because it does have that completely different cupped leaf shape to it.
So this is a Ginkgo biloba thelma, a gorgeous, this one actually has some of those tube leaves on there. And if you look, you can actually see a little bit of looks almost like a thread leaf as well as some of those larger leaves. So you'll get a mixture of all different color leaves. Has a female name, actually a male.
Yeah, that's one thing you have to clarify with a lot of the ginkgos. There's a lot of them that are named after ladies, but they have a male tree, so it's not going to be fruiting.
I think there's a ginkgo named Louise, and I think someone wanted to have a Thelma and a Louise.
Probably. This one will have the stringier foliage as well, so it's almost like the Cotonoito, if you're familiar with the maple, but it has that kind of stringy thread leaf type look to it as well. So big foliage, tube leaves, and then the stringier thin foliage as well, which really gives it a really cool texture. Really dense normally like this as well.
Yeah, this was actually Old Witch's Broom, and it's a dwarf compact mutation, but this is a vigorous one that will end up getting that 8 to 10 foot in that 15 to 20 year window. So much larger growing than the tree like gnome. So it's a good mid-sized tree. If you don't have a huge space, you want an 8 to 10 foot tree and more upright, gorgeous tree that can give you some amazing color. And as you see here, we hit it just at the right time where you see that carpet started. And typically once you see that, you have about 24 to 48 hours and every single leaf is gone.
Do deer bite
they're considered extremely deer resistant. I think when Rutgers did their study, ginkgos were one of the top one of the top deer resistant plants. But Matt and I always say,
Yeah, we always joke that, like, I believe if they were hungry enough, they'd eat my shoe. Like, I would never say anything is 100% deer resistant. Like, I laugh sometimes when I go to some big box stores and I see 100% deer resistant. I'm like, blood good. And I'm like, 100% deer resistant. You know, like, there's no such. But it's certainly not their first choice, and it's one of the most deer resistant plants.
and one of their last
any.
choices, for sure.
They're not looking for the herbal benefits, apparently. They've got all they need.
It looks like a big head of cabbage, but oddly enough, they just don't like the taste. But the ginkgo tea, if you try it, it's actually pretty good.
Ginkgo tea is delicious. Maple tea tastes like foot and sock. Do not drink maple tea. I thought I'd try some maple tea in Japan. I was like, I gotta do this. You never Mr. Maple. Awful.
Now,
Awful.
we, on the other hand, we did have one of our friends who gave us some maple colored apple cider. Was it?
Yeah, it was flavored with apple cider, so it was delicious.
So it was apple cider, but the coloring, they used
Pigment all
red
over.
Japanese maple leaves. 75 red maple leaves to make a little small bottle on the color, but it was
delicious. But if you just get the maple flavor,
So Saratoga is a classic male selection. This was a selection by at the Henderson Experimental Gardens in California. Actually, was this Saratoga? This was actually the Saratoga Research Center. But the neat thing about this is the leaf shape. The leaf is more fan-like and not as divided. You don't see that extra division there in the middle. It gives a soft feel to a larger ginkgo. And
it's a very like airy, open, almost like fan-like appearance to the tree too.
yeah, very maidenhair-like. And this is a tree, a more upright male, that in the 15 to 20 year window could be 20, 25 feet.
Todd's dwarf, we love this one. It's a very bubbly, small, compact dwarf, but it opens up a little bit so you can kind of see the different separations. We compare a lot to maples, but it's kind of like a Macawi Atsubusu shape, if you're familiar with that. It kind of makes those little crazy arms everywhere. And it's just nice and dense. It's very thick and full. And I would say probably the defining thing about Todd's dwarf is it always have a lot of different size foliage. So on that really dense habit, you'll see leaves that are super tiny all the way up to much, much larger foliage. So there'll be some that are like the size of a penny and some that are more like this size foliage as it gets to the mature growth, which I think looks really cool.
Yeah, it definitely provides an interesting texture that if you have that beside a gnome, you can really tell the differences and they really show off differently, especially with their form.
And it kind of just keeps putting all these little different arms like that too, which is nice.
Again, with the ginkgos. Same electric fall color on all of these ginkgo selections. No exception here with the Todd's dwarf. Also known as Todd's broom because it was found as a witch's broom mutation.
We love snow cloud. You'll see it, we actually had this tree. One of our friends had brought it back from Japan 20 years ago and had it under the name Frosty. So if you see Frosty, we believe Frosty and snow cloud to be the exact same plant. We grafted it a couple years ago. We're like, the only people with this is the coolest thing ever. And then snow cloud hit and we're like, okay, I think it's the same thing actually. So really cool plant. We started doing a lot of snow cloud. It's another one of those variegated ones that doesn't revert. That's why we love it. I mean, it just doesn't revert. You can fertilize it, you can grow it in your garden, and it's not just going to pop on you in 2 weeks and be all green.
Yeah, actually, Barry Inger, who many of y'all probably know, was the guy who brought it back originally, and he talked to the guy who brought back Snow Cloud, and they brought it back from the same place.
So both came from Japan and were separately introduced, but he didn't introduce his widespread. I think we were probably one of the only people grafting it for him. So
we found a photo of Frosty online, and being the crazy maple people we are, we said, Barry, who did you sell this to?
track it down now.
And then we tracked down through all the people we'd sold it to until we found someone who would send us wood.
So most people list this tree as too young to know a height for. The original one did come from Barry, and it's probably about 6 feet and 20 years. So it's going to be another dwarf as well. The original Frosty is only 6 feet and right at 20-year span. So
Yeah,
really nice swirling variegation. Snow cloud just puts on that intense white right behind the green. So you get that kind of striping variegation to it.
And in the springtime, you'll have a much more cloudy, more of that yellow cream that you see there. During the summer, it will fade a little bit as more chlorophyll comes into the leaf. But as you can see, we've got some more here on the tables. They're still showing some of that variegation.
This is one we were actually shipping out a few weeks ago, and we stopped and took a picture. You see our boxes. We just took it over. We ship everywhere in the United States, so we box these up and send them all over the continental U.S. But yeah, that specific one went out that day. Really an awesome tree for the variegation. What we like about it again is that it holds that variegation.
And I
very
believe
distinctly.
last year was one of the conifers of the year.
Yeah, it was listed in the group.
Yeah. So the 2010 conifer of the year is American.
It sounds like the way our redneck friends say America, so it's always going to go like, yeah, I got that American. But it's actually a Dutch lady's name. And so Piet Vergelt, you see a lot of his introductions. Piet, you'll see Peve, Starfish, Peve, Stanley, Peve, Minaret. Yeah, there's tons of really cool Peve series. Well, he didn't do that with this one. This one's actually named after his wife. Maracan was how he would technically say it.
But everyone calls it American, so we just often end up going with that too around here. But excellent dwarf, really slow growing, compact, and one of our favorite of the dwarfs.
Super dense as well. This and Gnome are probably our two most popular dwarfs because it just keeps that real nice dense habit to it as well. So typically 4x4 in a 15-year period. Still that nice palette of just gold and yellow in the fall and really nice lush kind of a globe-shaped feature to it. And it fills out really nice on its own. I mean, you can certainly prune ginkgos, but you don't have to. You don't have to prune ginkgos at all. This one's going to lend itself to that shape on its own naturally.
So this is a selection by Ross Moore. Some of y'all might have known Ross Moore. He was a plantsman out towards the Greensboro area. He found this weeping ginkgo and took it to Brian Upchurch. And as soon as we got into ginkgos, Brian was like, "You've got to graft this ginkgo." And I'm like, "Why?" Well, if you know anything about ginkgos, most of the weeping forms are actually more horizontally growing. So pendula.
We love pendula, but it should probably be called horizontula.
And there is a cultivar called horizontalis, which is another, horizontal growing. Ross Moore is an exception to that. It can be extremely cascading. This one's actually one they had over here. They moved it, I believe. What?
You have the necessary.
Yeah, and it is gorgeous. It basically, you see where they had the stake on it, going up through here, and then just going cascading straight down from that.
We love the shape of this one. I mean, it just continues to put on lots of branches going straight down, which is impressive to us.
And this is one that Tony's got over there, and is literally just growing right across at Tony Avent's place, Plant Delights Nursery at Juniper Level Botanical Gardens. And it's just crawling across the ground. It wasn't put on a stake. And you see, very, very cascading.
If you put dirt and a rock on top of it, will you end up with the same type of plant?
They will root. They're very slow growing. Most of these are grafted that we do. You certainly can root ginkgos by far. I mean, they're easy to root too. So you certainly could do them from rooted cuttings and sticking them. We like for them to get out there a little bit quicker than 1 gallon sometimes, so we do it that way, but nothing wrong with a rooted ginkgo. They do great.
Now, I will say that some of the upright types will root more quickly and more readily than some of the dwarfs.
Which
and
is
some of the
certainly a lot more
winged
difficult to root. So
How big is the root ball if you needed to move one?
depends a lot on the size caliper of the tree and the age. We probably should develop a part of our page where we talk about. We always tell people with maples, you can Google American Nurseryman Standard and you can kind of see what size caliper per what size root ball. They'll blow you away in Japan because you'll see a 40-foot tall tree and it's like this big of a root ball. It scares me to death, but they move all these crazy, gigantic plants with very small root balls. It depends a good bit on the size caliper. Something like this, foot to 2 feet root ball is going to be fine on something like this. But certainly Tim could attest to how big the root ball probably was on that Ross Moore they moved. So it's probably a lot.
Really tight. All the soil fell off.
Oh, well.
It was wide, but
Yeah.
not deep.
So it depends a good bit. Ginkgos have a low spreading root system. It's not something that has a huge root system. One of the nice things about them is they're not a very invasive root system. So they tend to spread out and do well, but they're not something that roots up your whole garden as well.
Yeah, and ginkgos too, if you ever do have to move one, they're really hardy. They're extremely hardy. So still you want to do it during the right time of the year. You want to do it during the fall, right after they drop the leaf, or the early spring before they leaf out. But they're extremely hardy. You'd be surprised the almost magic tricks you could do with a ginkgo. One of our friends in Connecticut, who's now passed away, Dennis Dodge, he used to attest that he could bare root a ginkgo in July, ship it to Texas, they could ship it back, he could sit it on his stand on his nursery for a week, hit it with some Super Thrive, and the tree would leaf back out. and keep going. So really hardy plants.
We're crazy about Ross Moore though for that weeping shape. We love that habit, just low and spreading. Typically, in a 15-year period, it's like 6x6 and that kind of shape in a 15-year period.
So Jehoshaphat is one of many ginkgos that was found as a dwarf mutation at Spring Grove Cemetery. I think it's actually in Ohio. Spring Grove Cemetery in Arboretum. And they basically have their whole cemetery lined all around with ginkgos.
There's tons of brooms going on there too.
Tons of them. And often when you find one broom in an area, the same thing that caused that broom might cause a broom in another plant, especially if it's a plant of the same type. And so sometimes people say, oh, it's a virus. Oh, it's radiation. You know, a lot of different things can cause a witch's broom or a broom, depending on whatever affects and makes a change to the meristem of the plant. And oddly enough, at this arboretum, there's been, I think, 4 now or 5 brooms that have been found. So Jehoshaphat was actually Spring Grove number 84. And I say that because all the ginkgos now have numbers at the bases of it. And so that means on the 84th ginkgo, if you look up, you'll see the original Jehoshaphat. This is one that's typically a little lower in spreading. So it will typically get about 3 feet tall and about 5 foot wide. And that's typically what it does for us, is it's more short and spreading.
If you see the original broom, it's much bigger. It's got a much bigger root system going on too. That it's got a 50-year-old plant pushing the energy to it.
Yeah. So really neat plant. This is Spring Grove, and this was Spring Grove number 86. So 2 ginkgos away, we've got.
This is more of a little bit a dwarf as well, but a little bit more of a columnar shape. We love the dwarf ginkgos. It's really what draws us to them, is that palette of yellow and that smaller kind of habit really are what sucked us into all the different cultivars. So we're certainly a sucker for small compact ones. But great kind of bubbly rounded appearance to this one too.
And this one often gets taller for us and almost very conical in its shape. Which
Very
is,
dense.
Yeah, very, very dense and conical, which is a really beautiful and a completely different trait than the Jehoshaphat. On these dwarf mutations, they may both be dwarf mutations in similar areas. When you take them off and you graft them and evaluate them, you start to see that they're 2 completely different plants. One of the reasons why I explained that we've got a Jehoshaphat from Spring Grove and Spring Grove from Spring Grove is because in some books, you'll see they'll say, this equals this. Well, it doesn't. There's a bunch of different ones that were found there, and it did say that Jehoshaphat actually equals Spring Grove number 84 because that's where it came from. So just to...
This is actually an example of one at the Morris Arboretum, and just kind of a larger specimen, a very old one there of that. Really nice shape.
It is great if you don't have a huge spot, but you've got a taller space, because it doesn't get super wide often, but will get taller than it does wide.
Little leaf, ginkgos are always popular for bonsai. We showed that picture of the bonsai earlier. Little leaf has tiny, tiny foliage. It's not the smallest ginkgo, typically around 15 to 16 feet at maturity. Certainly by restricting that roots, it keeps it smaller. What's so popular about little leaf is that the foliage is just really tiny. I mean, it's like the size of a nickel on the foliage. So there's actually Tim's hand there with the small foliage example.
So Weeping Wonder is one of those selections that has both the thread leaves and the tube leaves and the regular leaves, but a weeping habit. So, you'll see a couple different forms of this, one being one that's a little more wide-spreading, and then one that's weeping. And that's simply because if someone keeps pruning it up and shaping it, ginkgos start to hold that form. And so then if they continue to propagate off of that form, you still have that form. And then there's the other one that's more cascading.
We actually graft these off our most weeping shaped parts of the tree, and it retains that information, so it's going to even be more pendulous. Weeping Wonder, you'll see it sold in Europe as Mutant Weeper, but it was actually a selection made in America, even though Mutant Weeper kind of sounds cool, kind of sounds like a superhero or something. But this is the right name for it. This one should be sold as Weeping Wonder.
Yeah, they actually say in,
kind of sounds like a superhero too.
In the Czech Republic, I believe it's also sold as Chernobyl. Yeah. So definitely a really neat one that's really different on its foliage and makes a really interesting shape for sure.
Bryson City, really cool plant. For years, I would look at the list of ginkgos as we're crazy ginkgo collectors, and a lot of people collect ginkgos in Europe, and I'm like, why does Bryson City keep showing up? Like, we're in western North Carolina. Bryson City's like an hour and a half from us. We're like, well, why is this important? And this is actually at the research center in Fletcher. Tom Rainey was like, y'all need to be producing Bryson City. It's a really cool plant. So we started looking more into it. And Tim can tell you a little more about the backstory of it.
Yeah, Miss Mary Bryson Tipton was a missionary in China during World War II. when Japan invaded, basically she took a ginkgo, and they were getting all the Americans, and brought it back and planted it in downtown Bryson City. Now I've seen this ginkgo, and I probably should have taken photos of it out of leaf, because I've definitely seen it plenty of times out of leaf. I've yet to see it in leaf because I haven't went to Bryson City since I've known about the tree while I was in leaf. But there's a little plaque there that tells the story behind it. And this is extremely popular, narrow growing ginkgo selection all across Europe. And like I was saying, for years we tried to find it. We're like, where could this be? And sure enough, it's right there in downtown Bryson City.
No, the older one is certainly, the one in Bryson City is a little bit wider because it's certainly very old. This one is probably more like a 25-year-old specimen grafted from that one. But you can see even more narrow in its younger age. The older one, I would guess, is probably like 40 feet by maybe 15 feet wide, where the 20-foot variety, 20-year-old selection here is more like 25 feet and only like 5 to 6 feet wide in that same time frame. So.
We have a garden show that we do that's in Waynesville, North Carolina. And I've had plenty of people, when I bring the Bryson City, I set up towards the front where people can see the tag, because people who know the tree in Bryson City, they just walk up and they say, here's the money. And they walk
It's
off
crazy
like
how
this.
much we saw that one like in Europe. It kind of shocked me. I didn't expect it to be as cool as it was once I found out it was from right next door.
And it's a favorite tree with all the locals for sure. It's a crazy that we live that close. We live within an hour and a half, an hour 45 minutes of it, and yet we had, no clue because we hadn't actually saw it.
Troll, again, another popular one. Always popular with kids. Kids always love gnome and trolls. Like the two most popular. Kids always come there like, I want a troll. And so that's probably one of the most popular selling ones for people that are gardening with kids. But troll is a nice, real compact shape. Again, this is another broom. A little bit different leaf, as you can see. Certainly a rounded, irregular shaped leaf. Gives it kind of almost like a crown-like appearance, as it kind of has these little cupped crowns all over it. Again, a really dwarf compact form. This is going to be more of a small globe shape.
So gardening with kids, that's one of the most important things you can talk about a lot of times. Do it if you're not doing it. We grew up, our grandmother had 2 broken hips, and we grew up working in her garden when we got off a school bus. And we got our passion for gardening.
Really, so.
We got part of our passion from gardening directly from our grandmother, who passed on her love for gardening to us. So definitely do that. And ginkgos are a great plant to do that with. One, because you can tell them the whole story of like, this is a living fossil, this is one of the oldest plants on
They
plant
look
records.
prehistoric. They look like something a dinosaur wanted to eat on. So right away, kids are sucked in that it kind of looks like something a dinosaur might have walked by a little bit.
And then 2, you can select ones that have fun names that they'll love, like gnome and troll.
My 8-year-old niece has a troll in her yard, and she's kept this alive for 5 years. So we were impressed. We're like, how much say she's 11 now, so she's had it for 5 years. She had it since she was younger. But yeah, so she's 11 now, and she's kept that tree growing, and she's like, it's still doing great.
So you might recognize this because this is right over here, the JCRA. And this is Chi-Chi. This is some of those growths that Matt was talking about. Now, the neat thing about this is it just gives it a real unique interest. There is Chi-Chi, and there is also one that we do called Dingling that has longer protrusions.
I never guessed where we got the name right. If you want to make everybody laugh in your garden, Chi-Chi means boobs. So let's go ahead and put it out there. It's the elephant in the room. That's what it means. So that's why it has that shape and why it's referred to as boobs officially.
So yes, it has some winter interest going on, or year-round
Really a
interest.
neat habit to it. These are going to have the same kind of golden fall colors, but just with these interesting shapes that form as well. Really popular for bonsai as well because it gives that really older appearance and just kind of a different talking piece in the garden for sure.
And like Matt said, it really gives that almost prehistoric look to it. When you look at it, you think about like the stalactites on a cave, and you're like, wow, it really adds something to the tree, especially as the tree ages. And the more a tree this ages, the more and more this shows up, the more and more interest people are going to be like, wow, that tree's really unique and different, and really appreciate the prehistoricness of a ginkgo.
Nana horizontalis we like a lot too. This is another low spreading weeping form. I know it's again more low and spreading than weeping, but you certainly get a lot of branches that hang down.
And you'll see what this one has done is it's literally been put up on a standard, and the reason being is because when you put it on a standard, branches will cascade down more. But if you put it on a lower thing, it will still cascade, but it's going to be often more of a low contorting form that sort of twists around. Like if you went in here and looked at these branches are all different directions, which really gives some good winter interest after the foliage drops.
How tall is that?
If you do a low graft of it, in about 15 years, about 4 feet tall, but about 6 to 8 foot wide. And Nana being the dwarfer form, horizontalis does get a little bit bigger.
Jade butterflies, one of our most popular male upright clones. Jade butterflies kind of has that nice bubbly appearance to it. Just kind of has that butterfly-like look to the leaf. The leaves are really tightly divided with a nice little crease in the middle, so it kind of makes that butterfly shape to it. This is typically a 16 to 18 foot upright, which is really nice overall, kind of what we think of as a nice street tree form with all the branches arching upward.
Yeah, and jade butterflies, obviously, people come to find ginkgos. It's often one of their favorites because it's a name that they know and it describes the foliage really well. So this is obviously one of our top sellers.
It's one of those times where a good tree makes a perfect name for it as well.
So this is a really, really neat selection. Are any of y'all, is anyone in here familiar with plant ploidy? This is one of the few ginkgos that I believe has had its chromosomes doubled, simply because the leaf is so much thicker.
And short and dense, which are characteristics sometimes of that as well. The original cultivar is jagged jade, which you may have seen. One of my favorite
This is
ginkgos.
jagged jade.
Jagged jade.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the variegated form in a minute too. Just gonna see, let's get excited, I guess. But I love how it has that almost prehistoric look as well, where it has that jagged, kind of serrated edges to it. Like it has that kind of just whipped out, like it gets real frayed on the edges, which I think even looks more like a dinosaur may munch on it, which really gets me excited about it.
And you know, this was found as a chance sport or seedling in Oregon by one of our friends, and I really think it might be one of those instances where something accidentally got hit with weed killer or something and it doubled the chromosome, and then they found this amazing plant that's really unique and different. Because this is one of the few ginkgos that really has a different leaf, different texture. You go up and look at it and you're like, wow, that's really starkly different.
And I jumped the gun on it. We do have a variegated form of this as well. We'll talk about it in a second. Jagged jester is a variegated form of jagged jade. This is one of the newest variegated ginkgos you'll see out on the market. It's a really cool yellow variegation striping throughout the green. So it has that same serrated leaf. This is just a sport found on jagged jade, but it has that really unique kind of jagged serrated leaf.
So we've got the jagged jester, which we've got over there that's got the variegation to it. We've got the jagged jade that has the upright habit. We also have, I didn't put a photo of it, but it has the same leaf as jagged jade. This is a selection called bullwinkle.
Can you guess where it gets the name from?
Now, the neat thing about this ginkgo is it has a almost antler approach to its growth. So if you think of like an elk,
as well.
it has a spreading but sort of upright and semi-pendulous shape. So it'll do exactly what you see it doing right here on the stake, and it makes that sort of antler-esque shape.
It's like moose antlers.
Yeah, and that's where it gets the name bullwinkle.
We actually do a dwarf miniature that goes with that one called Rocky, so there's a Rocky and a bullwinkle. I think we're currently sold out of Rocky, but yeah.
It's funny because when people are buying them, a lot of times they'll go Rocky Bullwinkle, Rocky Bullwinkle.
Plant collectors, right? You gotta have both.
And we're currently sold out because we had more Bullwinkle, and we had one more Bullwinkle than we had Rocky.
Really cool shape to the leaf.
But definitely a really neat plant, and a neat shape for it with that unique foliage as well.
We really like the outside the box ones though, just different style leaves. You know, I mean, there's so much going on with this genus, but it's fun to see truly unique and different ones. Now you may have seen this one going around a bit online too. This is Praga, which I think we actually do list right now on our website. It's a super contorted form. This is,
So
as you can see.
this is a dwarf form that will get that contortions to it, really thick caliper to it. This is actually from Prague in the Czech Republic, or not, it was Prague in Austria. Is it Austria?
I forget.
Czech Republic. Yeah.
Czech.
So
Yeah, it was Czech.
it's from Prague, and it's sitting right here at one of the science buildings at one of their universities, and it's just amazing. Everyone says, "Oh wow!" And so naturally, Matt and I, we had to find someone who had snuck it over, and
To get some sign off the original.
yeah. And
But just because that really gnarly contorted shape, which is really cool. Of course, this is a much older plant, as you can see the base of it there, but really a cool habit.
you're down here, you're looking at it from this level, but if you actually, they took a photo really close to the ground. If you look at it in other photos, this tree is only about 10 to 12 feet tall. And so it's not a very huge plant, but it just has a really thick base
How
to
old do
it.
you think it is?
This one here, they think is over 100 years old. And the growth rates from us, I would expect it to be somewhere around 6 foot tall, maybe 10 foot wide, in a 15, 20-year window. But as it ages, it doesn't keep growing a lot.
It gets super gnarly.
It gets gnarly and thicker. So that base is going to get bigger, but it doesn't get much. It's a very slow grower past that. Which is
I
a
don't know if
unique
you have
shape.
BZN in the thing, but those are two of our most contorted forms, BZN and Praga. Both are for European selections, but made more for that contorted overall branching.
And we do a Praga, which basically will twist around like this. We do BZN, which will twist around like this, as well as Robbie's twist, which does a very similar thing.
Really cool habits, though.
So this is actually found in the Czech Republic as a witch's broom. It's called Kopista. And this is a newer one. It's mainly known for having this super, super stringy new growth. It has some of the stringiest new growth of any of the dwarf witch's brooms. This is the witch's broom growing right here. You see that clustered mess? I always love showing witch's brooms in our presentations, because if you find a witch's broom, especially on a maple or a ginkgo, give us a call.
Hey, you laugh, it's worked a few times already. We'll come look at it and graft it and see if it's worth naming or doing something with it.
And we can help evaluate it and get it going, get one back to you, and you can see how it's growing in your yard. And we're plant geeks, so y'all are plant geeks too. Keep an eye out for witch's brooms.
Looks like a little squirrel's nest almost of just density. Yeah, but really fun. This one just gets that stringy, elongated foliage, but also as the summer goes on, you'll see some larger, the juvenile new growth flushes are a little bit larger.
And yeah, you see it right over here. It'll have a mixture of other large leaves, but that new growth is the stringiest of any of the ginkgos. And that's Copista's really claim to fame, is it's really, really unique and different as it is on that new growth. So this is a new selection called Volkert Select. This is a dwarf and a little leaf form, and if you get up close, it almost has that jagged J thicker leaf to it. So this is a completely new ginkgo that's pretty unusual and different for sure. So fruiting ginkgo.
So we're going to talk a little bit about female ginkgos. These are great if you like to collect them and eat them. They're also great if you have an enemy who likes to garden and you want to give them something. We joke, but fruiting ginkgos, like, believe it or not, we started doing Mr. Ginkgo when we had 150 different cultivars of ginkgo, and we're like, we're never doing any female ginkgos. We get calls every week for female ginkgos, so they're getting to be really popular in the garden as well.
When people are doing more and more of the edible landscape, they're starting to realize you can have an edible ornamental. You just need to have it placed accurately. If you've got a larger property, you might want to put your ginkgo towards your neighbor's side you don't like as much.
Yeah, if you got that neighbor on your fence line who complains a lot.
And so often what people will do is they'll take this fleshy nut here, and it's considered an Asian delicacy. You need to wear gloves when you're doing it because it does have butyric acid in it, and butyric acid can, if you just get it all over your arms, almost cause a rash like poison ivy or something. But if you take gloves and you clean this here off, you just squeeze it out, the little nut comes out of it. You can crack that nut, and inside is almost like a real meaty substance. You can roast that like a chestnut, and it's really, really delicious. We actually had it when we were in Japan last year. And
Boiled ones not so much. I tried some boiled ginkgo nuts. No, not my thing. But
yeah.
really a cool way to do it. It's getting super popular. If you live in areas where a lot of people are harvesting these, you won't even notice that there's a female ginkgo from seed. Like, so if you grew seeds of ginkgos, you would have 50-50 male and female. Some would be male, some would be female. That's why we have grafted selections that are clones of known male selections. We have some people that want specifically grafted selections for that. So these are grafted with that in mind. And pretty neat way to do it, honestly. Hiyonari is the most prolific fruiting form we do. Typically, Hiyonari, Ohatsuki maybe actually a little bit more even prolific. But this fruit's typically in a 3 gallons.
So this Hiyonari is a Japanese selection that produces a larger fruit. The reason that's important is because if you're actually using it for edible purposes, the smaller nuts on the inside, they don't produce a lot of that meat on the inside of the nut when you crack it open. Hiyonari produces a larger fruit, larger nuts, really, really tasty fruit on the inside, and it does at an early age. So you get it in like a 3 or you know, a 3 gallon or slightly older than that, it starts fruiting pretty soon. And so if you're really wanting to teach someone about, you know, oh, these plants, it does it. You don't have to have a male and a female. Females actually self-pollinate the way they set up. And people say, oh, if you have one in a 1.5 mile radius, that's just because they know there was one in a 1.5 mile radius away. They actually self-pollinate themselves and fruit mostly all by themselves. And Hiyonari is definitely one that does that. So if you want fruit, this is an excellent, more upright selection. They'll end up getting about that 10 to 15 foot size in that 15-year window. And gorgeous yellow fall color, great edible ornamental.
When it's not fruiting, how can you tell if it's male or female?
That's an excellent question. So yes, how can you tell if it's a male or female? Well, if it's a seedling, you can't.
It's just age.
It's age. And sometimes a ginkgo, a female ginkgo, might start fruiting at the age of 6 or 10 or 20.
One of the good things about witch's brooms too are typically witch's brooms make them infertile. So most of your witch's brooms can't seed. Most of the more contorted thin leaf types, like we know jagged jade, that contorted small habit, isn't female because it just doesn't fruit at all.
And a lot of times they've been evaluated, most of the time they've been evaluated for a period of about 25 years. And once you've evaluated for a period of 25 years, the chances of them fruiting are slim to none.
So when you buy one, you don't know.
If you're, unless it's a grafted selection. If you buy a grafted selection, you know that it's,
Like a known male cultivar, like something like Bryson said, has been around forever, and I know it's not a fruiting selection. The good thing about a lot of the male uprights are they're older cultivars typically. So those have been around, and we know for a fact what they do for a proven amount of time.
there's old wives' tale that you can tell by the way the leaf is shaped. That's completely made up. We can go around our nursery and I can show you, this is a female ginkgo, this is a male ginkgo. The leaves look the same, or the leaves
look
look
a skirt,
different.
and this looks like left. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't, no. I'm like, what about this one? Well, I've got 150. That can prove that wrong in 30 seconds.
So Tremonia is an excellent selection. It actually came from Europe. This is a columnar selection. That is a columnar female selection. So this one will fit in a small space, and the fruit, literally on this one, are going to be falling straight down.
And the fruit actually don't smell on their own. It's when they sit there and nobody picks them up, which is true of like apple trees too. Really, the only apples that are that kind of stinks, but they do have a very pungent smell if they're left, for forever. But if you collect them, they really don't smell right away.
And Tremonia is a columnar selection, very much like the Bryson City. It's going to be tall and narrow, but a columnar selection of a female.
Do deer eat the fruit?
I haven't. I don't think so. I haven't had any experience with that in areas where there were deer. Doesn't seem like something that they pursued. Might run them off actually. They're running a little bit.
And so here we've got Santa Cruz. This is a selection from Santa Cruz, California, that has a spreading mounding habit, which is kind of unique on a female ginkgo. So again, you can have a different form of an edible ornamental. You can put this in a unique spot in the yard, and if you want to go out and collect the fruit and make those roasted ginkgo, it is actually really, really tasty, a great Asian delicacy. And these are all selections that were selected for having that larger fruit. And most of these here, like Santa Cruz, it may take 8 to 10 years for this one to develop its meristem enough to be able to produce seeds. If you're looking for the earlier fruiting one, that Hiyonari is probably one of the best selections.
So if you hate our presentation, throw ginkgo fruit, not tomatoes at us. That's a good thing to bring to a plant presentation if you're angry.
And so I thought I'd throw some fun maples on the last questions page to compliment with the ginkgos. They're great complementary plants.
So to clarify though, all of our ginkgos are typically male, or they have a big label that says this is a female ginkgo. We keep a very distinct difference. So if you're not looking for a female ginkgo, and don't be afraid, it will say female ginkgo on the label if it is.
All of the ginkgos we brought, except for the Hiyonari and the 3 gallon, we've got one Hiyonari and a 3 gallon. All the one over on the table, they're all male selections, besides the Hiyonari.
Do you have a question,
which says
Richard?
fruiting on it.
What do you use for rootstock?
We use straight ginkgo biloba. It's what you would get from seed if you collected seed off Hiyonari. In fact, very popular to grow those 4 seedlings for that purpose. But yeah, they're just grafted on the straight ginkgo biloba, straight species.
And you'll hear people they'll say, oh, I grafted this onto a male. Does that affect the top. And, or I grafted this to a female, does that affect the top into turning a female? It doesn't. It only affects it if people don't trim off the rootstock and then the pop comes off and starts growing from there.
One of the problems you'll see a lot where people will have like a super old autumn gold, but they actually bought understock instead of the right plant, so they have a huge fruiting tree essentially, but because it was grown improperly to begin with.
And most of those are the ones that have been grafted on a standard. You'll see that
It helps the low grass
And then
as well.
The low grass, you have a much less of an issue with that on.
Can you purchase rootstock?
We don't offer any, but yeah, it's something you can find around from time to time. Great way to do it, something like something that Ohatsuki or Hinari will provide you with more than you'll ever want early, so you can grow it yourself, and it's pretty quick growing, it's easy to do.
Yeah, often whenever we grow Japanese maples and ginkgos, one of the first things we do is we look for the most prolific fruiting ones so we can put them out as stock plants to take seedlings from as they're going. And Hinari is an excellent one for that because it fruits early and fruits a lot. And then if anyone wants to roast it like a delicacy, you've got that bonus as tribute too.
Do you put chips on growing the Japanese maples like you do for the ginkgos?
Oh, sure. Do you have any questions about those? We'll answer any questions you'd like.
Yes. What do you do to get the Japanese maples really going?
Well-drained soils are, again, ideal, so it is similar to that. Maples like it slightly acidic, so don't lime them like you would a ginkgo. Ginkgos like the lime because it takes them to a little bit more alkaline. Maples, you tend to throw it off a bit, so I don't lime my maples too much. Well-drained, slightly acidic soils are ideal. Without a doubt, all the maples we do great early morning sun, late day shade. Certainly a ton of different ones that can handle all-day sun, so it depends a bit there. But if you have any question, early morning sun, late day shade works for literally everything.
Like the Oranjola and the Benny Haggeroma that you got, both those can handle full sun. They're vigorous growing, they can handle full sun, or they can handle, partial sun. But
The number
those
one
are more
mistakes for
heat-tolerant ones
ginkgos
than
and maples are the same mistake. Overwatering. People will say, well, I don't know what's wrong with my tree. It gets an hour and a half of water every day from our irrigation system. I'm like, you drink water for an hour and a half every day. Let me see what happens. It's like, I think I know what's wrong with this plant. But yeah, so overwatering is the number one thing. You want to make sure it saturates but then dries out completely. They don't want to be in boggy or soggy conditions. And as you can see, like even times like this, we get massive rainfall. Sometimes it'll change our yards, or something stay a little bit more soggy than we realize. So that's the number one thing I look for if something's going wrong with a maple or a ginkgo is what are your water conditions? Is it staying too wet?
Now, another issue that I have heard some people say that can happen with the ginkgo is a vole. Now, I'll tell you the trick to do with a vole and how to stop them from messing it. They only mess with them at a young age mostly. So the best thing to do is when you get a ginkgo, cut the pot around the top. Leave it about that much around the top of the pot. Take the bottom of the pot off, cut the bottom of the pot, and plant that in the soil. When the vole is going around, it's only going to hit the top, and it doesn't go down underneath and start searching around. So basically, you just created a little barrier because they
Not a
eat
huge
surface
problem,
roots.
but a good tip to avoid if you have a ton of those around.
So it's an easy tip to, as your plant's getting established, that you can put in there and do. And as the tree gets bigger, it's not even going to know it's there because it's going to grow around it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Right here first, then we'll go to you.
You mentioned that they don't have real extensive root system. Anything planted with some wind shelter on it or stake when they're...
Typically, no. Ginkgos are really sturdy wood. They're extremely wind resistant. Like, we didn't really get into the durability of them, but they're super wind resistant and super salt resistant. So, like, people put them near pools with excess salt because they can take all kinds of weird conditions. But ginkgos are super wind resistant. I've never had issues with anything ever blowing over on it, a ginkgo blowing over itself. You'll actually see some massive ones near the Great Lakes that get some pretty extensive wind. And so
you'll see them growing along the coast, like down by the Battery down in Charleston, getting lots of wind coming off the ocean all the time. You'll find it all around the ocean where you're seeing lots of high winds, lots of heavy salts, and
that's something we deal with.
extremely heat tolerant. And then you go up further north and you find them where they're growing where you think that it's so cold most other plants and trees wouldn't do well, and the ginkgos are there thriving. And so it's amazing that if you have a spot in the garden that's getting at least 4 hours of sunlight, the ginkgos are going to thrive and do well for you in that spot.
Right back here, and then we'll go to you. Who's next?
Does it matter what time of year you put the water on it?
We typically do it once in early spring, like even on a 1 gallon, we'll put 3 tablespoons in a 1 gallon. Sounds like a lot, but it does fine. We typically do it once in early spring, once midsummer, and then again in the fall. Yes, right back here.
You mentioned bonsai work, so some people keep them as container plants.
Great container plants.
Obviously.
You know, ginkgos do great in a small pot, especially a lot of the dwarfs. They lend, like gnome lends itself super well to a small container planter. Those are super easy to do. You know, with bonsai, you're just restricting those roots, so it can be a little bit more challenging. There's all different levels of that, but easy to do and really easy container plants for sure.
We could leave it outside.
Oh yeah, they'll leave out year round. Now, again, with bonsai, it depends on how deep your tray is and things like that, how much it can freeze. I leave my containers out year round. So we don't treat these at all. They're out in cold frames, are completely outside. 99% of our ginkgos that are in 3 gallons were outside last year completely all year.
And
Now-
can you speak to how long the color on average stays this brilliant?
It can change a bit depending on conditions and temperatures. You know, really early frost can speed that process up. It tends to depend a little bit on the amount of rain we're getting that time of the year as well. Typically, it's about a 4-week period. Like it hangs on a little bit longer than most fall colors.
Is it 1 week?
4-week.
4 weeks?
Yeah, typically a 4-week period. It's typically a longer fall color season than most plants.
And as your plant gets more established, you'll start to see a longer display of fall color.
Certainly on like an older mature tree, it hangs on a while.
Like a plant that you plant the first year, you may get a week of fall color. But then as that plant gets older and older, as those roots develop a way of being able to get more nutrients and water up when it doesn't have that chlorophyll in the leaves, you start getting a longer display of the fall color.
Any other questions?
Are you fertilizing or just putting on?
We fertilize as well. You know, we always recommend low nitrogens with maples, but ginkgos can actually handle a little bit more nitrogen. You know, something like a 15, 10, 10 is very similar to what we use, but you can get up to a 20 or something. You don't have to worry about that nitrogen number as much as you would with a maple. Typically on a maple, we never go above a 15, so most of ours are capped off there because we don't want to push them too much. The key for fertilizing ginkgos is cutting it off for May. You know, we fertilize everything in our nursery early spring until May. When June comes, we don't fertilize at all anymore. And you'll get better fall colors if you're not trying to stay active. So that fall color is actually the tree shutting down for the season. And a lot of our bag releases, you'll see, they say 180-day release. So if that tree's trying to stay active in November, you're not going to get as spectacular of a fall color. And it's also going to winter better and be more durable if it's not trying to push foliage, you know, in December. I only do the fertilizer once a year in the early spring, and then I line them 3 times. That's what we typically do in the nursery. We'll cut off all fertilizing. And we're kind of weird because we'll be potting a lot of things up at different times. And so after May, we just cut it off completely. So anytime before that works, once a year is what we typically do.
One thing that to really note about ginkgos too, if anyone has seen people who graft conifers, you'll know that if you graft from a side branch, sometimes you'll get plagiotropic growth that'll try to grow sideways. It's the same with ginkgos. So a lot of times when you're grafting a ginkgo, it'll start to grow sideways. You point it up, and then all of a sudden it goes straight up. Because they're easy to shape, they're easy to go, they're easy to do, they keep their shape real well. So essentially a lot of the not weeping forms, but a lot of the forms that are upright, when you first graft them, they may be growing sideways. They may put a branch over here. But essentially what we do, as soon as we take them to a 3 gallon, we stake them up, and then they start going upwards, and then they develop their natural form. So it's really important if you have a young ginkgo, put a stake on it, because that'll point it upwards, and then it does its thing from there. As you can see here, we point it upwards, and then you already see this will start to do that antler effect we talked about. And that's what it will continue to do. And it's really important for young ginkgos to stake them. If you go see our 3 gallons, all of our 3 gallons are staked. But a lot of times 1 gallons don't have enough growth to really put a lot of stake on them.
And it's not as important with things like gnome or American that obviously are going to stay real dense and compact anyway. Any of the uprights, we like to go ahead and give them a little bit of a start. Any other questions? Hey, thanks so much for coming out on a Friday night.